Guys, what's a good sign that a woman is just using you? Pretty much the same as when any person is just using you. The relationship feels unbalanced and unequal, with you giving more than you are receiving. In a good relationship, friendship, whatever, both people are giving what they want to give without coercion and both feel adequately rewarded for it. Sometimes one person needs more, sometimes the other, but it evens out over time. When you feel like you're being coerced into giving more than you really want, whether that's with force or emotional manipulation or whatever, you're being used and you'll eventually resent it. Yeah, this is a great way of thinking about it. All these answers about food here, but I've had a friend for years who was in a worse financial situation than me and I'd be buying her food when we go out and event tickets and more expensive gifts, but she'd cook for us when we hung out at her house and made me handmade gifts. Now she has a better paying job and after her first paycheck, she tried to buy me a thing I mentioned wanting a while back. I know I contributed more financially, but she contributed the same if not more in terms of emotional support, so I think it's a good friendship. There's a big difference between asking how someone is doing because you actually care, or because you just want something. I had a friend who I talked to daily for over a year who very rarely checked up on me, even when I clearly stated I wasn't doing alright. The only times she did check up on me was when she was having a rough time herself and wanted support. Eventually I just slowly withdrew from her, and even uninstalled Snapchat, our main source of communication unfortunately, without telling her. Now on the other side, I have one friend who I talk to very rarely, but she will frequently, maybe every month or so, shoot me a text out of the blue just asking how I'm doing with life and all. She seems genuinely interested, and tends to call back to the last times she checked on me to see if I've improved, worsened since then. It's not much, but she definitely makes me feel like I'm worth something, and it's definitely the best trait a human can display. Back in the 70s my dad would go out with his drinking buddies. My brother was born in 1975 and had to stay in the hospital because of some spinal cord problem. Luckily all went well. None of his drinking buddies wanted to help him even though they would spend a lot of money on beer every week. Only one helped him. That's when my dad realized who your friends really are. After that he stopped drinking with them and spending money on beer. He was good friends with the one who helped him until the friend passed away in 2019. My dad eventually owned his own small restaurant and never charged the friend for food or coffee. That was a way of paying him back for the help received when he truly needed it, and the friend never abused the gesture. This makes me so sad. My last boyfriend, we had emotional check-ins where we would ask each other how we were doing mentally. If we didn't want to talk about it, we had an emotional safe word. This came to be because the first time I ever asked him how he was doing and he had a bad day, he became overwhelmed at the possibility that I wanted to know how he was, and his ex-wife had never asked him that. So I told him if something became too much to use a neutral word we both found funny but not over-the-top funny, like something you couldn't work into normal conversation. And slowly he began to use it less, but he would get so stressed out and apologize so much for opening up to me. We broke up, but I always felt so much sadness that the man was 32 years old and had never had a woman who wanted to know he was okay. I sort of contradicted myself with the funny word. I didn't mean like laugh out loud level funny, but more like a funny sounding word that can't be worked into regular conversation. Absolutely. She often accused me of having no empathy, because I was very calm and level-headed, despite the fact that I work with disabled kids, which requires a lot of empathy. She had no real concern for anyone unless it was to maintain public image, so to speak. No issues putting on others, having family members help her out doing things she basically couldn't be bothered to do herself, no issues not paying her fair share of the bills and doing none of the housework, despite being very well paid, a lot more so than me, and working one less day a week than I do, a complete lack of empathy or care for anyone for herself, and a pathological liar, not to mention generally had nothing nice to say about anyone, and always felt the need to try and put me down, dismiss me, take me down a peg to make herself feel better, maybe narcissistic personality disorder, something she again accused me of having simply because I am not insecure. Yes, this is quite possibly a factor. All the dark personality traits are somewhat linked together, and they, all to varying degrees, involve decreased empathy for other people and increased focus on the self. People high in these traits can get very upset with tiny things that impact their own life and yet show an absence of concern for other people even when big things happen. You do not have to score in the clinical range on these scales to show these sorts of tendencies. Lots of people are trending somewhat in that direction. I learned the hard way myself, and then chose a better and more empathic partner, and it's like night and day. This is exactly what happened in my younger years. I was super into a girl that I worked with and we would hang out all the time after work. However, I was never getting anywhere with her. I know I had made my intentions clear and she never told me it would never happen ... but just kept the possibility of it happening open. I eventually saw the writing on the wall and moved on and met my wife. I tell you, the second I stopped pursuing her and started acting like just a friend, she flipped on a dime and started laying it on strong. I would like to think that I was smart enough to not fall for her shit. The reality is I was so smitten with my wife that I don't think anything could have made me notice another girl. If I had moved on to anybody else besides my wife, I probably would have fallen for it all over again. Have had people tell me I can't be there for you in any way, shape, or form, but I don't want you to leave. And, for the double whammy, I can't handle you leaving right now. You're making me angry that you brought up your issues. You can't come to me for things like that. You knew I was upset, all while crying, sobbing to make you feel bad. Edit, I forgot an important sentence. You're being so selfish. If that's not being used, I don't know what is. I understand that people go through difficult times, and that sometimes it is difficult to help other people through issues when you have your own. But if you truly care about that person, you make time. That's what a friendship or relationship is. A relationship is a give and take. If all you're doing is giving and all they're doing is taking, you're being used, regardless of the excuse. Reminds me of a saying I heard a few months ago on the internet. Givers, be mindful of your limits because the takers don't have any. Edit, and for those of you who will argue, oh, you just don't understand. Yes, I do. I have been at the bottom of the deepest well, on half a dozen different meds to keep me sane, when a friend of mine came to me needing help, and you know what? My issues didn't even come into play. They were there for me when I needed it, so I'm there for them when they need it. That's how it works. We're both doing better now thanks to each other. If you can't heal with your friend, then they're not your friend. I had a friend, who set me up with a coworker that was like this. When I found out I was just one of a list of guys she used for meals, I asked why she didn't tell me that's what her coworker was doing. She informed me that her policy was not to get involved in other people's business. I told her that you'd expect a friend to grab you if you were about to walk into traffic, not let them get run over in the spirit of not getting involved. Then I never spoke to her again. That was 20 years ago. Still makes me mad. Not the girl, the hell with her. I can't even remember her name, but the friend who wouldn't lift a finger to help me avoid a bad situation with a coworker she barely knew. No thanks. I feel like my years in NYC were a long list of friends who turned out to have absolutely no loyalty at all when something became mildly inconvenient, which sucks. See, I've always been a here, take the shirt off my back type. Oh, I can answer this one. When asking you for something, time/money/physical effort, if you say yes, she will almost always and immediately look for something else to ask you for that is related. Like, can you stop and pick up those hair things for me? I say yes. Okay, can you also stop by the shop next door and get me that thing I like? This kind of things isn't a big deal on occasion, but when it's a repeating pattern, it's a red flag. She will point out how much she fucks you and how it's for you. Will treat most of your interests with disdain or indifference. Doesn't ever really care what you have to say. When you attempt to point out any inequality in the relationship, she will get extremely defensive and attack you for being selfish, and tell you need to be more supportive/giving/a real man. I'm not a man, but I've known too many not so great women and have had guy friends used by women, so I think I can chime in here a little. She never wants to listen to your complaints, but that's all she does herself. She asks about your bank account and your job often and says she's just wondering. She gets unreasonably mad when you forget a holiday. She makes deals with you using her body. If you buy me this, I'll suck your dick in the car. She lies constantly about her own financial situation or personal relationships. She always wants to hang out with a specific friend of yours. She doesn't thank you for things, but rather expects them. She manipulates you by threatening to withhold sex until she gets her way. She only says I love you when you give her something or do something for her. She never pays for anything herself. She guilt trips the life out of you. She is unreasonably, explosively defensive when you voice your concerns regarding the relationship. If your girls is doing any of these, find a new girl. If you and your partner do this for mutual, well-intended fun, then there's of course no problem. It's when one person uses it specifically to get what they want, as a manipulation tool, that I find it to be a serious issue. You should never have to earn sex, unless that's a DS thing that you've both discussed and consented to beforehand. Girl is using my body and he doesn't see it. She only reaches out to him when she's single. Nothing ever comes of it as she will find excuse after excuse to not actually meet up. Then when she gets a new boyfriend she ghosts him unless something goes wrong and she needs a shoulder to cry on. Guys, if she only reaches out to you when she's hurt or vulnerable, she doesn't want you, she wants sympathy and knows you'll give it to her. Edit. And to be clear, this isn't an exclusively girl thing to do. Guys can be guilty of this too. Edit too. And if you were in this situation and hung on only because you thought you'd get sex, relationship out of it, that's nice guy. Incel behavior. If you hang around for a reason that isn't I genuinely care about this person in a non-romantic context, and would keep doing this if there was no sexual, romantic desire, then that isn't you being the good guy. You don't want them, you want the idea of them that you've built in your head. It's possible you're both wrong. Oh oof. Wasted a year heartbroken over a girl that kept doing this to me. She rejected me at first with an I'm not ready just yet, and I kept thinking just yet was around the corner. It felt like we got along so well, and once every few months we'd reconnect and become extremely close for a few weeks, and each time I thought things would finally work out, but then she'd start ghosting and finding every excuse to cancel on me last minute. It eventually clicked that I only heard from her when she was between different men. At some point, she bailed on me for the last time at the last minute, and it clicked that I had unrealistic, nice guy expectations and that she was using me to feel better about herself. Never heard from her again. When she flirts with you all the time, and also everyone else, and asks you to come over to do complex electrical work and says she'll take you out to dinner, and you agree because you like the work and like being around her, but she brings her kids along and ignores you the entire time. Then when you're not around her she never texts or calls and just waves at you when you pass her at work every day. making no effort to talk to you whatsoever. And when you try to talk to her, she gives you short answers like yeah, fuck you, Liz. If this thought ever pops in your head, that's already a sign. I don't think a healthy friendship should ever have this thought popping up in the very first place. Rose-tinted glasses are a very real thing and will make you stay in a bad relationship even though the flags are very obvious. I only hope those who are reading this thread can be brave enough to leave for your own good. Some clearer signs: lack of two-way communication. Only her issues matter, yours doesn't. Similarly, if you're the only one starting conversations but she doesn't, but still keeps you around, start running. She only looks for you when she's in trouble, needs a shoulder, having a bad time. A healthy relationship should share the good times as much as the bad times. Your worth to her is measured by the material things you can bring to the relationship. If you feel like once you stop investing money, time and you would lose her, stop whatever you are doing immediately and find a better person. I'm in a long-distance relationship and we speak at least briefly every single day, and sometimes I would like to spend 30 minutes to an hour or longer on the phone with her via FaceTime. I offered this as a date night for us to communicate and catch up. Well, I do this and it's fine, except she never has ever done that for me. I have made it abundantly clear to her that I would like her to initiate on her own to spend time with me. She just keeps telling me she thinks our communication is fine and she has a very busy life. She just fills it up with frivolous appointment and spending extra time at the dog park or other random things. Deep down I feel like she's settling cause all the other guys left her, but she says she loves me and that's my problem. What to believe? Be sure to ask what sort of bad boy she means too. I tend to think of it meaning he's got a lot of tattoos, got in a fist fight once, or maybe he rides a motorcycle on the weekends. Was asking a friend about others' friends she could set me up with and she mentioned Val liked bad boys. I laughed and asked what she meant. She went on to say that Val had a history of dating guys 15 years her senior, 40 years .0, and most recently was dating a married man. Like she took him to hang out at home and her just out of college roommates out to make chit-chat with a dude old enough to be their dad. Now that's what I think of when I hear bad boys. Also lost all respect for Val, for the cheating accessory part, and a bit for her friends who thought it was more funny than bad. Prior to reading this thread, I've had my suspicions about myself but I'd easily ignore them. Now I'm almost certain that I'm the one who's using her and perhaps even pretty toxic. How does one change that sort of thing about himself? In my mid-20s now and over the years I've noticed a lot of narcissistic traits in myself that I suspect to have picked up from my mother. Is being a good person always just going to be a facade? Edit. I figured this would get buried and I'd just end up deleting it. Not a fan of putting myself out there even if it's relatively anonymous like Reddit, but I've gotten a ton of positive feedback and I'll definitely be looking into options for therapy. I appreciate everyone who took the time to constructively respond. Thank you, smile. Okay, old woman here who hasn't dated in 30 years, if your relationship is new, and she wants the expensive dinner, number. If you want the expensive dinner, to share the experience, yes, so many times I see posts of PPL meeting for the first or second time at some expensive restaurant, meet at a coffee house for the first date, or a bar at happy hour, or an affordable restaurant for a light meal. Please don't treat someone you do not know, and may never know, to an extravagant, expensive meal. Also, no, do not give her money if you are in a committed relationship. If you go Dutch, if the both of you care about each other, different story. A real relationship takes time, and interest on both sides. You should not be a bank, she should not be just objectified body parts. There's a woman that I work with, very intelligent, very good at her job, not especially motivated to go above and beyond, Can't really blame her given the environment we work in. She was hired about a year after I was, straight out of school. She's a few years younger than me. I immediately took to her because of her intelligence, and she was always very upfront and eager to learn new things. I can admit, I have a thing for her, that is very clearly not reciprocated, which is fine. She gets stressed easily, so I try to keep her stress level down, take extra tasks on so she, and everyone else too, doesn't need to worry about them. Make sure the equipment she needs is good to go, etc. She's not necessarily aware I do this, or at least isn't aware of the extent or the reasons behind it. There are some tasks where people are assigned to take care of them in pairs, and we were recently paired up for one. Now, we also just recently had a bit of a friction between us, and so someone asked her, unaware I could hear them, if being paired up was going to cause an issue. Her response was, "No, it's fine. At least I won't have to do much." That was a pretty good sign.